Good morning, YouTube. Today I'm going to do a video on getting my Fairmont MT-19 rail car ready for service. I'm starting a little bit late this year. I had the car up at my buddy's house to rewire it over the winter time, and due to one thing or another I didn't get it till June, so getting a late start on the season this year. So it actually works out because I get to make a video on lubricating the bearings underneath, doing an oil change, and a general get ready for the season. I'm going on a trip tomorrow on the Conway Scenic, so come along with me and we'll pull the machine out. It's sitting on rail right now, but I have a portable track, which is just dimensional 2x2s that I use to pull it out of the building there, and I have these steel ramps on the trailer that come down and go onto the portable track. So let's pull it out and get started on lubrication. Alright, now we're out on the portable track, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our brake for safety, center up our shifter knobs right here, and remove the towel cover. Alright, so this gives you an idea of what we're looking at inside. These cars came in really two configurations, either belt or changeover. The belt cars were driven by a Fairmont ROC or IKB or some sort of single piston engine with two flywheels running this way, a belt. This car is a chain, hence the T and MT, which is for transmission. So this is an Onan CCKB, about 20 horsepower, 20-ish. Comes back to this transmission here, which is a 2-speed reversible, and it goes to a chain through a series of sprockets down to the rear axle. So first thing we're going to do is open up the engine oil to allow that to vent when I open it up on the front to drain it out. A little hard to do one-handed, but alright. So, all that old engine oil drains out. You notice it's black. It is black oil. These CCKBs, they don't have filters stock from the factory. You know, some railroads put on filters, and some hobbyists after on their own put filters on these, but from the factory they didn't, and this one doesn't. So the other thing I look at is inside the drain plug. Look for any signs of metal shavings and anything in there, which I really don't see. So that's a good sign. So while this is draining, we'll take a walk to the back and get under the car and start lubricating the various bearings on this car. Alright, so we're here in the back of the car, and give you a little tour of the underneath here. So here's the fuel tank. It's 4.5 gallons regular gasoline. This here is my air tank. This is the drain cock for the air. That silver thing, that can looking thing, is the compressor. There's the muffler, rear hitch plate. And if you look up that way, you can actually see the drive chain. Comes off the transmission over a whip block back to this rear sprocket here on the axle. And this is the rear axle here. So I'm going to start lubricating some of these bearings. Starting off with the wheel bearing here. Now when I lubricate bearings, first thing I like to do is wipe off all of last year's gunk. I like to check that these thrust collars are still in place and still tight, and they are. I inspect the condition of the springs in the bearing. I don't see an excessive side-to-side play, so and what we do is put it on the zerk like every other bearing and just kind of pump it till you see the grease come out. Now, as far as frequency of lubrication, I don't have a set mileage or hours. I probably tend to do it every other trip. And my thinking is, there's the grease coming out, you can see it. Is these bearings are, one, pretty old. They're pretty expensive and hard to replace. I mean, it's a lot of work to take one of these bearings out. And grease is cheap. So, you know, every other trip I throw some new grease in there and, you know, hope it lasts. You know, not that they're impossible to find, but they are hard to find, replacement bearings. So we'll do the idler sprocket next. So we're pretty deep under the car now. And we're going to put grease into this bearing here and this bearing here. And these are the bearings for the clutch linkage. This bearing here is for the brake rod, center bearing. And it's got one other bearing there and one other bearing over there. So we're upside down on the car now. I'm on my back. So this is extremely difficult to film. So I'm not going to. But it's going to kind of show you what else is down here. There's the front wheels. There's the rear wheel bearing that we just put grease in. You can kind of see the spring arrangement a little bit better. The axle and the springs, and then the pistons for the oil light bearings or suspension in this car. Take our rag, swipe off that fitting. Grease going on there, and put some grease in that bearing too. So, get onto this point here. And there's another bearing under here that's a sneaky one. You gotta be almost a contortionist to find it. That's the bearing for the articulation of the sprocket case. So we're back in the car, and I discontinued videoing outside all the filling the bearings. It started to pour, so it's been humid and kind of off and on thunderstorms, so let's come back in the car and refill the oil. I've put the drain plug back in, and I got my funnel. So Onan engines, well, at least the manual, they recommend using a 30 weight oil, no multi-viscosity, unless you're operating in really cold temperatures. Alright, so we got the car put back together. I got the little box up there that blocks out a lot of the engine noise and kind of cleans up the look of the car. I got the top on. As a lubricate chain daily with SAE 10 engine oil. Well, I've never seen number 10 engine oil, so I just use regular old-fashioned oil. Motor oil I put into a lubricating can and put it on there. So I'm going to do a quick fire up of the car and check the systems. That's actually the operator's seat, and other than the clutch pedal on the floor, you can operate the car from both sides, but that is the operator station. So I got our brakes set, and I'm just going to confirm that we are in neutral. So I just move it over to the far detent and then center it up, and then it's like a locomotive. Hit our master switch, ensure all our switches are off, and then crank it. Good to put on the trailer. Alright, so now our steel rails from the trailer are in place. The winch cable is hooked up, and I'll turn the crank and tie up here. Alright, I'll strap it down and take it out tomorrow for an excursion. Thanks for watching.